What is going on, everyone? It's Jack here from Thought Tech. Hope you guys are all doing well. Welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm doing a camera comparison between the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus and the iPhone X. Now, both of these phones pack some of the best cameras on the market, so I thought that this would be a really interesting camera comparison. To keep in mind some of the specifications, they both pack two cameras, which means that they both will be able to give you the flexibility to zoom in and get a closer shot and also have that portrait mode, which is an important note to make. When you upgrade to the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus, you're going to get that second camera lens. They also both have 12 megapixel camera sensors, and they both shoot 4K video, so they definitely pack some of the best cameras on the market. So let's get into some of the images and testing them out. Okay, so I just got done shooting, and there's an overarching theme of a difference in colors. So when I refer to the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus, I'm just going to say the S9, as a lot of it applies to the smaller S9. But the S9 tends to go with a cooler tone, whereas the iPhone X tends to go with a warmer, like yellowish tone. And that's really obvious in most photos that you take, especially with people. So I'm going to start off with a photo that I took of myself in portrait mode. So this first photo was taken in like a portrait mode. So on the iPhone X, that's called portrait mode, and on the Samsung Galaxy S9 and S9 Plus, it's called live focus mode. And basically what it does is it tries to distinguish a difference between the foreground, the subject, and the background, and then blur out the background to give more of a professional camera effect. And they both do a really good job. At first glance, you're gonna like both of these photos. When you zoom in on both of them, where the Samsung Galaxy S9 kind of messes up my hair on the left side, the iPhone is a little bit better, but when you look around the top and everywhere else, they look pretty similar on both. In terms of color tones, on the S9, I look a little bit more yellow and maybe a little paler, whereas I feel like the iPhone X on every photo gives like a creamier look, like a little bit more tan. I think it makes a person look better. I don't know how much more accurate it is, but I just kind of prefer that in this example because I feel like it just makes the skin tones look more creamy and nice. Okay, this one of a building kind of shows the color thing that I was talking about before. So the S9 has much more of a blue tone in the skies and kind of overall in the picture, whereas I feel like the iPhone X goes a little bit more to a more neutral tone. So I feel like in general, it's really personal preference which color tone you prefer. I think that they both look great though, and they're both really sharp, and they're also both properly exposed, which is nice to see. Let's move to the next photo. Okay, in this next close-up of flowers without the portrait mode on, you can see that the S9 has a cooler blue tone, whereas the iPhone X has a cooler orangey yellow tone. They both look pretty sharp and nice, but I tend to prefer in a photo like this, the warmer tone. I feel like it looks more welcoming and nice, but that's obviously personal preference. When we switch over to the portrait mode, I think that the S9 does a really good job with the edges, whereas the iPhone X struggles a little bit. They both look good overall, but when it comes to taking a picture of a subject that's not a person, the S9, from my experience at least, tends to do a little bit better on edges, but it obviously varies from subject to subject. That's just like the average overall theme. Switching over to a selfie, the S9 has a wider lens, which means that you won't have to hold your arm out as far to get a shot. But I think, again, that the color tones on the iPhone X look a little bit nicer. The S9 looks a little bit more blue and kind of pale, whereas the iPhone X has more of a welcoming, creamy look is like the way I'm gonna explain it. But I prefer the wide angle lens on the S9. I think it looks a little bit better. It doesn't distort your features as much. When you go to a portrait mode selfie, they both kind of struggle a little bit with defining the edges of my hair. I feel like on the iPhone, it kind of just blurs out one entire section, which looks a little weird. The Samsung Galaxy S9 has that wide camera again, which looks nice. Both of them blur out the background really nice. It looks natural aside from like the choppiness of the edges. They're both okay. I don't really use portrait mode on a selfie camera just because I feel like it doesn't do an amazing job. But with the S9, you can adjust how much of an effect it has, which is kind of nice. Whereas on the iPhone, it's one effect. But I think that in terms of coloring again, and this is all personal preference, the iPhone looks better. But let me know what you think, which colors you prefer in the comments section down below. I just prefer that warmer look for a lot of photos. In this photo of Times Square, I took a picture of a building with the sky, as notoriously the iPhone X kind of overexposes the sky. In this one, it actually did a good job, but the S9 sky is a little bit more vibrant, and I feel like that actually looks better. So in this particular case, I probably prefer the colors on the S9, whereas the iPhone X might be a little bit more accurate, but the saturation in the S9's photo is just nice to look at. As we were walking in Times Square, I took a little picture of a puddle to get the reflection in it, and both phones did a really good job picking up the reflection and exposing the entire image. So I actually am really happy with both of these. Nothing too interesting here. On this portrait mode photo of a tree, you can see that the iPhone X has a much blurrier background, but you can adjust how much of a blur the S9's background has in post. Both of them do an okay job with the edges, nothing ideal here, but they both are passable. Switching over to this indoor shot that doesn't have a ton of light, the S9 definitely tries to compensate for that by exposing the image, so some of the highlights are a little bit blown out. Whereas on the iPhone X, I feel like some of the shadows are a little bit too dark, so neither of them do a perfect job here. The iPhone X's colors are a little bit darker and a little bit more on the darker side, whereas the S9's colors are a little bit more vibrant because of the exposure that the S9 shows with this image. Going to the shot of this couch, the S9 definitely adds some more purple hues to the couch cushion, whereas the iPhone X definitely does not have that here. Also, if we zoom in on the floor, you can see where the S9 in typical Samsung fashion really saturates the floor, so it's a lot more yellow than on the iPhone X. The iPhone X might look a little bit more natural. It really comes down to if you prefer a really saturated image, because that's what you get most of the time on the S9. It's a little bit more toned down than past years, but saturation is definitely still here. This shot out of a window shows again the S9 going towards the more blue tone, so that's just like the overarching theme. You get that basically in every single picture when you compare the two. When you're just looking at it, it's not going to be like, wow, this is a really blue image, but when you compare them, you'll definitely be like, this image is a little bit more blue. Really just comes down to personal preference, as I've already said. Switching to a lower light shot, the S9 with its new variable aperture will tend to do better than the iPhone X in terms of letting in light when you shoot in that pro mode where you can activate the f1.5 aperture. But both of them do a really nice job in this shot where the sun had already set like an hour past the time I took this. Where on the iPhone X, the highlights look a little bit weird. The S9 does a really great job with that. And I felt like when I shot with the S9 on that f1.5 aperture at night, it just made the shots look like it was shot a lot earlier with a lot more light, and it made it look really nice. So I would say that in terms of low light performance, I tend to prefer the S9 just because it does a better job in letting in a lot of light without it being too grainy. Switching to some video shots, I took this while I was walking, and I think that in terms of colors, that kind of still holds true in video mode, but both of them have pretty good stabilization. Some of the times the iPhone X just looks a little bit more stable and has less of a jello effect, but for overall just holding out the camera and walking around with it, both of them do a pretty good job stabilizing the image. Okay, in this second to last image of me in Times Square, you can see on the iPhone X, since there was a lot of different lighting sources, it kind of underexposed me in order to kind of get the background properly exposed, whereas on the S9, it overexposes the background a little bit, but the subject, which is the main focus, is properly exposed, so I prefer that. And then if we switch over to the portrait mode version of both of these photos, I think that both of them look really good. They actually both handle the edges really well on this. Portrait mode, when it first came out on the iPhone 7 Plus, was terrible. It was always so choppy and the edges were always bad, but all of these phone companies now, a lot of the main flagships have really good portrait mode, and I think that both of these actually look really good. So that was kind of it for all the photos and videos that I took. Overall, I think that the S9 kind of goes to a more cool tone, whereas the iPhone goes to a warmer tone, so it really comes down to which one you prefer. I find myself preferring the iPhone for when I'm in the photo, as it kind of gives me a creamier skin tone. But I think that the S9 does a really good job on low light, and for a lot of photos where I'm taking a photo of a subject. Both of these cameras really impressed me though. So that's it for this video. Definitely let me know which camera you preferred in the comment section down below. Thank you so much to Greg for helping me out in this video. You should check him out, also linked in the description down below. And you should subscribe right here so you don't miss any other content, and you should watch my other content right here. Thank you guys all so much for watching this video, and I hope to catch you guys on the next one. Bye.